Hi, I just want to give you a quick presentation on Locke and identity. Professor Kravitz again. Okay, so here we have a baby encountering the self right in the mirror. That often is sort of the first experience of the self. We're not going to get into that today. We're going to look at some historical ideas about what the self is that gives some context to Locke. All right, so let's start with Descartes, right? He's around from 1596 to 1650. Uh, and and Descartes is is a dualist, right? In terms of substance, he thinks there's two types of substance, but one of them is more in a way certain. It's indubitable, and that is the thinking substance, the immaterial substance, the soul. And so that's where we have Descartes place the self. The self is the soul, and the soul is something that's eternal. It survives after the body has deteriorated and decomposed, and so it's what we really are, is the soul. Um, Okay, so that's one way of looking at the self. The self is the soul, and this is a pretty common way to think about uh, who am I, right? As we try to know thyself, um, and it kind of feels that way, right? It feels like there's something controlling the body, and like the body is a machine, and sometimes it's put as the ghost in the machine that's in the driver's seat, driving around the body. So this can make quite a bit of sense to people to say that the self is the soul. All right, let's consider a couple of challenges to this position. First, right, there's no sensory evidence to confirm the existence of the soul, right? Because when we use our five senses, it's to encounter material substances, right? We can't actually see something that's immaterial, that's invisible. Can't smell it either. There's nothing to it. So there's no way for us to detect the soul. We can look at the body as much as we want. We can study it. We can dissect it. You're not going to find the soul. So that's a problem, right? Can we verify the soul's existence? Well, not through sensory evidence. Another problem is what is the relationship between these two substances? How are they actually able to interact, right? Because the soul is immaterial, but the body is material, and matter is affected by other matter, right? There has to be something there that pushes it and passes on that momentum, and then the other piece of matter would move. But how does something that has this completely immaterial, how's that going to affect a piece of matter, right? How is that going to project a force? This is something that is a real problem for for Descartes. It's also something that he knows about, and in letters that he has uh, with the princess, uh, he he's challenged on this point, and it's something that he it's a challenge, right? He's trying to figure it out. So these are two issues with the soul theory of the self, um, that are really difficult. Okay, well, what's another theory of the self? We can look at a materialistic theory that you are your body, right? In fact, there is no soul. We can't find it scientifically through our sense observation. So let's just drop it. Let's just say you are your body. That's it. There's only one substance now. This is a substance monism. All right. And this also makes a lot of sense to us, right? That we are our bodies, that we're physical stuff. That's what we are. And well, there's also some challenges to this position. So let's think about that. Let me kind of read this and unpack it a little bit. So every physical characteristic, right? If we're just bodies, it's all physical characteristics we point to that makes us unique, is not an essential characteristic of being human. So essential characteristics are characteristics that are true for all human beings. So this is important terminology, right? That there's different characteristics we can talk about of something, and some of them are essential, which means that they're true of anything of that kind. This would be true of it, which means it won't distinguish, right, anybody from anybody, right? Because anyone who's a human being is going to have these essential characteristics, and if you don't have them, then you're no longer qualified. You're not that kind of being. So, so these characteristics won't distinguish us, won't sort of make us into individuals. And an example, according to Aristotle, is that being mortal is an essential characteristic of all humans. Okay. So it's not going to be the essential characteristics. What do we have left? Well, the body, these physical bodily characteristics that would then distinguish us from other people, from other human beings, would have to be not essential, but contingent characteristics. Another important vocabulary word, contingent. Another way of saying that is accidental. So contingent characteristics are not necessary, and they could be different. So I could have long hair or short or no hair, and I'd still be me. Right? These are all just contingent characteristics of me. And if it's not an essential characteristic, it has to be a contingent characteristic. And these descriptions of me could be the opposite, and it's still me. So we have here a problem with the self being the body, that the essential characteristics of the body don't distinguish us, and the contingent ones, well, they're accidental. They're not necessary. They don't define me in any way, because if they were opposite, I'd still be me. So my appearance can be altered in any way, and I am still me. All right. So with those two possibilities, that we're just our body or we're our soul, we found problems with both of them, and Locke knows that. So here's Locke's comes onto the scene. He's going to offer his solution here to the problem of identity. And from the reading, we see that his answer is that our self is our consciousness, from the perspective of our accumulated, recollected memories of our past conscious experiences. So, in a way, I am my perspective. And perspectives are always from some point, right? They're from context. They're context sensitive. And in this case, the context, the place where I, perceive the world, is to sit atop all of my memories that I can recollect. So Locke argues that his hypothesis can work whether we have substance dualism or monism, right? So whether we stand with Descartes or we stand with, a strict materialist, Locke says, and Locke doesn't claim he knows who's right, but he says, no matter who's right, my theory is going to work, because it doesn't matter. Substance doesn't really matter here. What he's talking about is consciousness, and consciousness could be attached to either material substance or immaterial substance. So whoever's right, his proposal can work. All right. Furthermore, right, Locke also argues that the self is determined by the entirety of our memories. Right? To lose one of those memories would result in a completely different self. The self is anchored in a history rather than a set of appearances. Right? And this is going to speak to the challenges in materialism, right? That it's completely contingent. Here now we are anchored to something that can't change. This particular history. Okay, so Locke appears to have avoided Descartes' dualistic issues and materialism's contingent appearance issues. And I've got a picture here of Locke trying. This is the one I found that I thought sort of was Locke, pretty happy that he feels like he's avoided these really serious challenges, right? And we've got to give him credit here. This is definitely very interesting way to approach the self. Okay, but guess what? There's challenges to Locke's solution. Here's the big one. Right? Your self is all based on memory and recollection. And memory and recollection is the least reliable form of evidence. Right? When we go into look at trials, eyewitness testimony, what someone had remembered, is notoriously wrong. Right? And these are eyewitnesses. Notoriously wrong in court cases and has led to many wrongful convictions and even executions, right? The court cases that get overturned later and people get exonerated often rely quite a bit on eyewitness testimony. All right. Well, as we recollect something, in that process, we reconstruct the memory. And in that reconstruction process, that memories can change. Memories are also subject to the power of suggestion. People can plant memories or alter all memories just by talking to us. So the self here is very unreliable and can change. And Locke is basing, our identity completely on that. So that presents a new challenge to identity, to who we are, to what it means to be a person, as Locke says. All right. Just want to end with some modern scholarship avenues. This is not something that's disappeared. It's new solutions are being offered all the time. One is the idea of the embodiment of consciousness. And this is sort of a phenomenological approach. And it considers consciousness as bodily. Often it's said we don't have bodies, we are bodies. And so it tries to make this distinction that keeps sort of dualism, but undermines it at the same time, right? How can we dissolve, blur, intertwine the dualistic model into something that's kind of like a complex monism, which is almost an oxymoron, right? Monism sounds simple. It's one thing. And now I'm trying to say it's complex. So, this is going to have its own challenges, but it's definitely something that a lot of work has been done and is being done right now on. Another avenue comes to us from the Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges. And he has a story, Borges and I. A story I really like. It's very short. You should go check it out. And in the story, he's just walking down the street. And he starts talking about how there's two Borges. There's the one that people write about that has this whole history and has all these different accomplishments. And you can talk about that Borges' story. And then there's this other Borges that has no history at all. Is just in the moment, completely in the moment, and completely absorbed in what he's seeing in that street, and just the brilliance of uh, the conscious encounter and experience. So this idea that there's multiple selves is another way to approach this whole uh, question of identity. And we could use the metaphor of calculus to take this a little bit farther and say there's a process going on, and that sometimes these different selves within us can integrate into some sort of unified amalgamation. And at other times, right, these selves can fracture and differentiate, uh, potentially all the way down to an infinity of infinitesimal selves, right? And that somehow between these two poles, we exist, uh, between, many, many selves kind of all at once, uh, the mob of selves, and then integrating into less and less selves, and maybe not one, but maybe just a few different ones that are competing against each other. Okay, well, I'm going to end it there, and hopefully you're enjoying uh, our adventures and thinking about what it means to be a person, a self, and to have our own identity, and what that is grounded in. Okay, thank you.